Hello again. This is Pastor Rick Bachman from the First United Church of Christ, coming to you and wanting to share a few thoughts with you on the stuff we're going through. It is going a lot longer and a lot more severe than we had originally hoped, and I am sure that most of you are getting to that point where you're just getting frustrated. And I understand it. I share that frustration, but as Christians, we are not. Again, I say we are not to be overcome or overwhelmed by the situations of this world. And which brings me to the point I want to share with you today, which is what can you and I as Christians do in a time of crisis like this? When we're isolating, when we're trying to stay that social distancing, how can we as Christians be missionaries in a world full of fear, full of doubt, and full of a lot of things that frankly overwhelm people? And the verse I want to share with you to begin with is 1 Peter 4:10. It says, "Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms." You see, we as Christians have been given a great deal of grace and of gifts that God has blessed us with. Not the least of which is the assurance that we can go through times of trials like this and not be overwhelmed, because we see things from a perspective of God's view, not our own. These are trying times. These are times that are making difficulties that we never could imagine or foresee even a few months ago. We're seeing food shortages. We're seeing all sorts of things that, frankly, many of us will feel powerless as to how we can help, what we can do. And of course, and I don't want to minimize it, but prayer is never a bad option. We as Christians are called to pray. We are called to be the light of the earth. And part of that light is being in touch with our God and taking to Him the issues that we see before us, the concerns that we have for our fellow man, for each other. Those are things we as Christians can do, but we're not limited to that. I want you to think of all the opportunities that you have in self-isolation. I know several of the folks in my church are making masks. They have a little bit of sewing capabilities, and they're giving masks to people to give away. The mask shortage is amazing. And to be honest with you, when the local area police department was giving them out, they were swamped with people wanting these masks. And folks from my church have been part of being in that process of giving them away, making them so they can be given away. And you know what? That's a Christ-like thing to do. It's a wonderful thing to do. And it's something that is allowing them to use the gifts that God has given them to bless others. So consider, if that's one of your gifts, please do consider it. The other thing we can do is to give food pantries and food shelters. I know the Marshalltown Salvation Army is running short of food. So if you've got a few extra foodstuffs, please consider making a donation to the Salvation Army or to a food pantry. I know our little food pantry in our parking lot has been quite active lately, being filled and being used. So I know the need is there, and I would encourage you all to consider, when you go to buy groceries, buy a few extra, donate them. Give them to someone who may not be able to do. Another thing you can do in isolation is you can make phone calls. Encourage each other. We're all getting discouraged. We all have days where the just overwhelmingness of this virus and all the limitations it's putting on us gets us down. And frankly, no one's immune from it. But it's amazing what a good, encouraging word from a friend can do. So take some time to make a phone call or two. Think about someone and pray about someone that might need a little extra encouragement today. and then make that phone call. Along that same lines, write cards, write letters. Make those things that have almost become obsolete in this new modern days technology. Let's reinvent the letter, the card. There are people in nursing homes that would just love to get a card or a letter that could be shared. So think about it. How little time would it take to write a card or a letter to someone who might be needing a word of encouragement? You know, the truth of it is, we all need a little help. And you and I have that ability. And in that same vein of encouragement, don't forget, give a call or a card to those folks that are out there on their first step of this virus, the nurses, the doctors, all the healthcare workers, law enforcement, the fire, the EMTs. These folks are facing day in and day out risks to their own life and safety, and then for risks to their own families. And wouldn't it be nice if they got a card or a letter thanking them for their diligence, showing them appreciation for what they're doing? I can tell you from being a police officer that I was thanked very rarely for doing my duty. But when I was, it meant a considerable amount. It was showing me that someone cared about me and the work that we were doing. So don't forget, these folks that are taking on a great deal more stress than you and I are equally in need of encouragement, equally in need of being encouraged by you and me. And we have that ability. And you know, I love the way the scripture tells us and defines service. Matthew 23:11 says, "The greatest among you will be a servant." To be honest with you, in the American way, being a servant is not something we want to strive towards, but as Christians, it should be. As Christians, we should desire to see, how can I serve my fellow man today? How can I show them God's love? It amazes me that at the time of Nero, in Rome, in its worst, most decadent era, that for the Roman citizens, a daughter was considered a waste, much like in the Chinese government today. And they were literally thrown away. If a newborn daughter was born to a family, they would take them to the dump and just throw them away alive. And Christians would go out into the dump and take on these babies and raise them. And in fact, you can see the beginnings of orphanages right then and there. And it's amazing to me that at the time of Nero, when Christianity was being condemned and persecuted in its highest degree, Christianity grew. And I firmly believe it's because Romans saw their selflessness, their love, their compassion, and they realized that these folks had something that they could use, namely the love of God. And to be honest with you, right now, this world is desperately in the need for more love of God. And you and I as Christians have that ability to show that. We have that ability to share it. So do not hesitate to do the good you can do. Do not hesitate to look for opportunities today to share what God has blessed you with. Because, my friends, while we are in hard times, we are also in a mission field. Most of you, when you think of a mission field, you think of a far-off place like Africa. Well, the truth of it is, that is a mission field. But the other truth is that right here, right now, you are in a mission field. You are in an area God has called you to serve others. And in that service, you can have as much impact as that missionary in Africa if you but listen to what God calls you to do. Finally, there's a reason to be in service. Yes, Matthew tells us we are to be servants, but Hebrews 6:10 reminds us that there is a reward for it also. It says God is not unjust. He will not forget your work and your love you have shown him as you have helped his people and continue to help them. You see, my friends, we are here for a purpose. God intended and designed us to help one another, to share each other's burdens, to be the light and the salt that this earth so desperately needs. In these desperate times, you and I have an ability to show a world hope in hopeless situations. You and I can share a love that surpasses all the evil that's in this world. You and I have an opportunity to serve. I would challenge you today to pray. But not only to just pray, but to consider prayerfully what God would call you to do in these times. You see, my friends, you have been given an opportunity. And while some will squander that opportunity away watching Netflix and doing nothing, others will jump onto, seize, and show the world why we have a faith that surpasses all the fear that the world has dealt with and is dealing with. That we will show people a light that before had not been seen. I've heard so many times in the last few years Christians bemoaning how no one wants to go to church anymore. No one seems to think it is important anymore. And I find it ironic that after 9/11, the churches were full because we realized situations were bigger than ourselves. And for a brief moment, we understood our need for God. Now, 9/11 came and went rather quickly. And the truth of it is, the lesson we learned in 9/11 perhaps left as quickly as it came. This crisis is not as quick as 9/11. And to be honest with you, the ramifications are long. I'll be honest with you, we're looking at when we can open up church, and I suspect it will be months. And given the fact that summer is brief and that the fall may very well bring on a resurgence of this virus, the reality is this could be a very long-term situation. And while that's discouraging, part of it is encouraging. Because while we are in this crisis, we have opportunity to show and reach to people who before have never considered God and their need for him. You and I, through this crisis, can be the light that shines in someone's life to show them that Jesus Christ is not only alive and well in these times, but is ministering. By our serving others, we show the people around us a God who loves them, who served them by dying on the cross. You see, my friends, when Jesus told us that we were to take up a cross and follow him, he did not imply that this would be an easy life. It did not imply that it was without sacrifice or without hardships. Indeed, it was to imply that the Christian walk could sometimes be difficult. And you and I are facing that difficulty right now. And I will be honest with you, I've seen both the good and the bad in the response. I've seen people who want to crawl into their tortoise shells and just hibernate until it's all over. And I see people excited to go out and serve others. I can tell you from my experience in talking to people, into working with people, that the folks that are reaching out are finding people so much more receptive. If when you're talking to someone, be it on the phone or wherever, if you simply ask a question, is there anything I can pray for you today with? And if they say yes, take the moment, right at that point, stop and pray for that need. My friends, something as simple as that can be life-changing to a person right now that has no hope, that is living in constant fear, who is living in dread of what the next moment will bring. We are not going to go through this crisis quickly. I wish I could tell you that in 2 weeks or 3 weeks this will be done. Be honest with you, I will be thrilled if in 2 months we're going back to normal, whatever normal was. But the truth of it is, my friends, for as long as we're in this crisis, we have opportunities to serve in a unique way. We have an opportunity to show God's love in a way that never has been seen before. And just like in Rome, when those Christians went out into the dumps to save dying children, the world will see something in us that they're going, those folks have something that I believe I need. And even at a time of persecution and hardship, Christianity can and will grow if we as Christians do what God has called us to do. So my friends, today I want to challenge you. Look out, reach out, look around. I love the fact that one of the churches I served in got a sign on the back of their notice board on the front of their driveway. And the sign reads, "You are now entering the mission field," as you leave the parking lot of the church. I love that sign because it so accurately depicts what you and I are called to do in this day and age. My friend, you and I are living in a mission field. And never has this field been more ripe, more ready for the Word of God, for the love of God. The question is, will we as Christians do the work of missionaries that we've been called to do, that God expects us to do? We will not see the church grow by sitting in our churches or sitting in our homes and praying away this virus. I do not want to minimize prayer, but there is a time for prayer and there's a time for action. We are in a time for both. Pray, get up on your feet, and go out and do the work God has called you to do. Be the encouragement, be that smile, be that wonderful word of encouragement that the world around you desperately needs. My friends, we will get through this, and I suspect that if Christians answer the call that God has given them today, we will come through this stronger and in a better shape than when we went in. The irony of crisis is that occasionally it grows us. The church in Rome grew exponentially. The church in China, which has been persecuted since its beginning, has continued to grow nonstop and is continuing to grow. In fact, I was amused in a funny way that Chinese are using identification software made by, unfortunately, United States computer people, and they're using this facial recognition software to identify Christians as they go out and tell people the Word of God. But since this virus, and now that everyone is wearing masks, the facial recognition software isn't working. And the Church of China is reporting that their mission field has grown and their ability to minister has exceedingly grown because of the virus. A terrible thing has blessed the church. where the government had persecuted them and identified them and arrested them if they went out to try and do what they're doing. Now, because of a virus, their facial recognition software doesn't work. And so they are able to do the work of God. That is not accidental. That is not something that just is circumstantial. My friend, that is God at work. So while the whole rest of the world worries about tomorrow, you and I as Christians who have a hope, who have a comfort, should be sharing with that world our hopes and our comfort through Jesus Christ. Because they've never needed him worse. And they've never been more receptive to hear that word. So if you've been reluctant because you've heard criticism or you've been shot down for sharing your faith, don't be discouraged. In fact, I would suggest you will never find a time where people are more open, more receptive. And like I said, and just ask people, can I pray for you today? You will be amazed at how many people will say yes and share a concern with you. I was in a grocery store where a person shared to me about their stepson, and I offered to pray for them, and they were so blessed and so thankful. It didn't take very long. It didn't take very much. It only took desire to serve, a desire to care, and a desire to show God's love. See, my friends, you are in a mission field. Please don't squander this opportunity. Please do not hide out in your house when God is calling you to come to the world in whatever way, shape, or form, be it letters, be it phone calls, be it through writing masks, donate blood, donate food, whatever God has called upon your heart to do, whatever you can do, please do. Because as Jesus said, the harvest is ripe, but the harvesters are few. The few harvesters we have need to be working hard because there is a ripe harvest before us. So please prayerfully consider how God would use you in this time. And have a God-blessed day. Thank you.